Today we're hopping back on the stress resiliency talk and talking a little bit about post-pandemic life and what you should keep in mind when you're diving back into your quote-unquote old life. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Wellness Simplified podcast. Simple wellness tips to help you improve your life without turning it upside down. With your host, award-winning fitness instructor, nutrition coach, and wellness expert, Suzi Fevens.
We've been talking a lot about how things are opening back up and we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel and going to be able to get back to our quote-unquote old life. And last week's episode, we talked about boundaries and how I feel like this is a perfect time to really look at your life and decide what new boundaries you want to bring into your life, or maybe reestablishing some old ones that kind of have slidden, is that a word? Over the last year and a half. And now today I want to talk about stress resiliency because we have been through a lot this last year and a half, and most of us, our stress resiliency is looking pretty slim at the moment, especially those who have gone through multiple lockdowns. The first time, it was hard. But the second time, a lot of people are finding it more challenging because their resiliency had already taken a hit. And now we're down to just this tiny little bit of stress resiliency, just the tiniest bit. And we think we're just going to dive back into quote unquote normal life, no problem. But we can't do that because our lives pre-pandemic, first of all, they're probably a lot more stressful than you remember. Secondly, we don't have the resiliency for it. Recently, I was talking to somebody who we were talking about starting a new fitness class, and they had asked me if I would do it, and I said that I couldn't because I'm instituting those new boundaries and I'm not doing more evening classes. But they were saying how they really wanted to offer a high impact class, and there's nothing wrong with high impact fitness classes at all. But I said, you know what? What people really need right now is low impact. Low impact doesn't mean low intensity. It just means that it's less jarring on your joints. And so many of us have such little stress resiliency in us right now. The stress response from a high impact class is going to be too much for our bodies to handle. And we're going to pay for it for days and days and days. We just don't have the resiliency right now. We don't have the resiliency for those super impactful types of activities. And they said, you know what? I never thought of it that way. And I think, of course you wouldn't, because only people who worry about stress resiliency think about these things. But the same is true for so many facets of our lives. We can't go full tilt like we used to unless you have been actively working on your stress resiliency and your stress response, building that back up. If you have been purposefully working on that, then you might be okay. And you may have been working on that without even realizing it through the things that you do in your life. You don't always have to be aware that you're working on stress resiliency to be working on it. But for the general public, our stress resiliency is so drained right now. And our stress response, have you over the last couple months found yourself feeling perfectly fine, and then the teeniest tiniest thing can happen and you are just beside yourself? Maybe you're crying, maybe you're screaming, maybe you're so angry, you're so irritated, you're irritable, you don't know why. That is called a stress response, because your stress resiliency is just in the toilet. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to make sure that when we are adding these things back into our lives, that we are doing so in a way that helps support our stress resiliency and does not trigger a stress response unnecessarily. Again, I'm not hating on high impact exercise, because there's lots of great high impact exercise that will help improve someone's stress resiliency if they're in a good place already. But a lot of people are not in that place and are going to be better off with a low impact option. That's why all of my classes, with the exception of Zumba, are low impact, and Zumba has low impact and high impact options so that we can find the right mix for each person. But be kind to yourself. If you're wondering how you ever managed all the things before, A, maybe you weren't managing them as well as you think, but B, your stress resiliency was higher before. You didn't have such a knee-jerk stress response as you do right now because you've been through a lot emotionally, mentally, some people physically, been through a lot. Cut yourself some slack. Your stress resiliency is probably low. If you can do things like adding more walks or bike rides, just easy bike rides, joyful movement, things that make you happy. If running makes you happy, even though it's technically high impact, it's not as high impact as a lot of things if it's done properly, then add that back in. Make sure that you're eating food and not just one meal a day. Like eat your breakfast, eat your lunch, eat an evening meal. Yes, 3 meals a day. Can you imagine? Drink something, preferably some extra water, but something. Drink something. Bathe. Wash your hair. Paint your nails. Do things to take care of yourself. We've been through all of the things that are basic human needs, not self-care, in previous episodes. But stress resiliency is really low right now. We want to build that back up, but it takes time. So be kind to yourself, be kind to your spouse, your family, your friends, your children. Everybody's kind of like ground into the dirt right now, and we need to give ourselves time to build things back up. Don't expect things to feel the same as they did pre-pandemic. We're not the same people currently that we were then. Maybe you'll get back there. Maybe you've made changes, instituted those new boundaries that we talked about last week so that you're not going to be in that same situation ever. But your stress resiliency is lower right now. It is lower. Take care of yourself. Don't expect yourself to dive back in. Add things in slowly. Last weekend, I socialized with 2, 3, I don't even know now, groups of people. And I was exhausted. And like I was sitting in a chair the whole time. It was just being around people exhausted me. And that might be true for you too for the next few months. It will take a while to get used to being around people and doing these things. Be kind to yourself. And that's all I have to say today. Be kind to yourself. Don't expect you or anybody else to just bounce back into the life that you had before. Ease into it. Allow yourself time to build that resiliency back up so that your stress response isn't as wild. That's it for today's episode. Keeping it short and sweet for summer, under 10 minutes. Let's do this all summer long, shall we? Have a wonderful weekend. I will talk to you next week.